Hello and welcome to LogiCast episode 9. I'm Carl Robinson, CEO and co-founder of Logicata, and I'm joined today by my colleague Jon. How you doing, Jon?
I'm okay. Hangover from the weekend, but I'm okay.
Good. That's what we like to hear. I know you're not a football fan, so you probably weren't hungover because of England's victory in the World Cup, but I bet many people are this morning. Not that, of course, everyone's going to be listening to this while the World Cup is on, but certainly at the time of recording it was. But we're not here to talk about football or hangovers. Logicast, as you may well now be aware, is a weekly AWS news podcast. Once a week, I personally curate a list of AWS news, which we distribute via my weekly AWS News Roundup newsletter. And then Jon and I take a deeper dive look at some of the articles that we think warrant further discussion. So we've got a number of articles this week. Of course, last week was the annual running of the AWS reInvent conference in Las Vegas. We didn't go, but I did attend some of the sessions remotely. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today is in a blog post that I wrote last week about all of the new service announcements made by AWS CEO Adam Selipsky at reInvent 2022. But we've got a couple of other articles that we're going to talk about before that as well. We hope to be at reInvent next year. That's on my bucket list. It'd be nice for us to be doing the Logicast podcast from reInvent in Vegas. But this week we're doing it from our sheds in southeast UK in winter. So not quite the same as being in the nice hot desert in Vegas, but we're still going to be enthusiastic about AWS news nonetheless. So what do you think, Jon? You up for going to reInvent next year?
Oh, if you pay for the tickets and the flights.
Absolutely, but there's no such thing as a free lunch, so we'll make sure that you earn your ticket and flights when you get there. Um,
It sounds
so
like, even though you weren't there, you sound like you've picked up a conference flu anyway.
I've picked up some sort of flu, and it did come on the day after me watching the reInvent keynote. So perhaps I did pick up conference flu by proxy just by watching the keynote and being virtually in the room with all of the other 60,000 reInvent guests. So yeah, who knows where that came from? But the timing, is it coincidence? Who knows? So this week we've got a couple of articles that we wanted to talk about, and this one did actually get a mention in the reInvent keynote, and I think it got a mention in my blog post as well. But we've got a separate article from Yahoo Finance all around Amazon's plans to be water positive by 2030. So we've spoken a lot about sustainability on the podcast before. But this is a new aspect of sustainability that I have to admit, prior to me seeing this article, I didn't even know it existed. By 2030, Amazon plans to be water positive, which means giving back more water than they consume. How is that even possible?
I have no idea. No idea. Like, sustainability is something that's important generally, relatively close to my heart. I've got solar panels and the batteries and all that sort of thing, and I collect rainwater off the shed and all that jazz. I have no idea how they're going to be water positive. Water neutral, sure. Because, as the article says, there's increasing pressure on global resources, and within the next 5, 6, 7 years, demand will outpace supply by 40%, which is just mental. Water neutrality, and to an extent positivity, but mostly neutrality, is something that you tend to hear coming out of power generation, because obviously they use water for cooling, and some of that gets lost in steam, which is not great for the environment, because steam, water vapor, greenhouse gas, everything gets hotter. The science on that is well known. So it's the sort of thing you come out with from power generation. So I don't know. I don't like saying I don't know, but I don't know. Yeah, it's what are they doing? They're water efficiency, sustainable sources, community water reuse, and replenishment projects. So this is, I suppose, what this is. This is not so much each facility putting out more water than it uses. It's the company as a whole, I guess. And they know that they need this much water, for air conditioning, cooling, and giving to the staff and all this sort of thing. So they have to then do counter investment in other projects that produce more than that, is I suppose what they're talking about here. I mean, sustainability is something that Amazon as a whole, not just AWS, has been kind of hot on generally because they can't afford not to be. The article does talk about the packaging per delivery and packaging efficiency and all that sort of thing, which they've been doing for years, since like 2015. And it might have been Amazon, it might have been another delivery thing where it might have been UPS, where they worked out that it was in the States more efficient to not turn left against traffic. So they do 3 right turns instead of 1 left turn because it was more efficient, because they're not sitting there, and in America you can turn right on a red light. So it's that sort of thing, I think, as well, which granted is not water, but you need water for producing fuel. You use less water. So yeah, odd, but important nonetheless.
I guess it's going to become like the whole carbon offsetting thing, where you just pay to plant some trees in another part of the world and tick the box. You mentioned the community water projects. I guess it'd be a similar thing. It will just be taking some of their profitability and investing it into water sustainability initiatives, so they can get their points to tick those water
Hopefully
boxes.
it's not a points-based system, because the carbon credits thing, and we're not going to go into detail on this, but that is fundamentally broken. It doesn't work. It's broken. So hopefully it doesn't turn into that, and it's very much more direct action.
Yeah, more positive. Being water positive could be more positive. Cool. Okay, let's move on then. So the next article was, I believe it was an announcement from reInvent, but last week was just a complete barrage of announcements from reInvent. So it's our job to sift through the barrage of announcements and just bring you the things that we think are interesting, or at least the things that we want to talk about. So the next article was on the AWS news blog, and it's about Amazon Inspector, which now scans AWS Lambda functions for vulnerabilities. I know you're a big serverless fan, John. So what's this going to do for serverless?
So the article touches on this. Again, this is another one by Marcia, which we like because she's very good with these. The article touches on this, the Log4j vulnerability that lots of noise made a number of months ago, where particular versions of this were just massively exposed and yada, yada, yada. What that found was that scanning your functions for vulnerabilities in your CI/CD process, you need to do that, great. At deployment time, great, we like that. The CVE at the time didn't exist, got passed, put up, lovely. The CVE then became a problem, we knew about it, and loads of things were impacted that were already live. Well, how was this missed? Because it wasn't scanned for. No one knew to look for it until afterwards. And yes, in the world of serverless, in the world of lots of other things, once something's deployed to production, it might not change for a while if there's not a business need to change it. So what this is doing is this is scanning things regularly. I don't know how often, but I think it's sort of daily or something of that nature. After it's been deployed for newly emerging CVEs and security holes generally, which is great. We like that because it's proactive monitoring. More proactive, more good, more better.
So yeah, it's not on by default, I guess. It's something you need to turn on.
Correct. Yeah, it's not free.
Yeah. Any idea off the top of your head what it costs? Or am I putting you on the spot again there?
Oh, I can look it up. 15-day free trial, and then it depends on how much it's scanning.
Yeah.
Pricing.
So
What's the pricing tab say? 30 cents per function per month. Not cheap. Not horrendous, but not cheap.
well, I guess
It's cheaper if it's doing container images and things.
So.
Yeah, exactly, right. This serverless project that we've got on the books that I need to get on with sooner rather than later is going to have 80 or 90 functions, right?
Yeah.
I've been in deployments that are more than 200 functions, and that's all of a sudden that becomes quite expensive.
Well, I guess, I guess what's the cost of a breach?
Yeah.
Or
the
the cost of
CISO's job usually.
yeah. So the cost of remediating a breach versus, couple of $100 of vulnerability scanning. I don't think it's outrageous, but yeah, like you say, if you're in an environment with lots of functions, then potentially it is going to start to mount up. Um, is it scanning functions that are not running? So if you've got functions in there that are
It's
not
everything.
doing anything, yeah,
Yeah, it's
okay,
everything. So the way it works is it's scanning functions, Lambda layers that are attached to functions, but only the specific version. So if you've got, because layers can have multiple versions, so if you've got several versions, it'll only scan the ones that are actually in use, which is fine because that's kind of what you want it to do. It does container images, which is important because you can run Lambdas based on Docker images, so that's important as well. So what it's doing is it's just, added Lambda functions. So Amazon Inspector itself is not a new tool, not a new service, because it's always been doing like EC2s and on push to ECR and that sort of thing. But they've just added Lambda functions to that.
cool. I guess more and more people starting to migrate to serverless, including the project that you mentioned. So that's a welcome addition to the portfolio. So let's move on then to my blog post, 17 new AWS services announced by Adam Slipskit reInvent 2022. We're not going to do all 17 because otherwise we'll be here all day. But let's just have a scan through and have a look at some of the announcements that were made. So let's pick on this first one, the preview of OpenSearch serverless, because I know you've got some opinions around that, John. So tell me what it is first, and then by all means share your opinions.
That's
I
this
know you
whole
don't need.
podcast, isn't it?
I know you don't need to be invited to do so. So yeah.
I have an opinion. Listen to me. Oh dear. So OpenSearch. Let's start with that. Quick definition of OpenSearch. It used to be called Elasticsearch until Elastic. This is a family-friendly thing, so ruined their public image. Let's go with that by mucking around with their licensing such that it couldn't be resold because Elasticsearch, amongst a number of other Elastic tools, up until not a huge length of time ago, were on like an MIT or an Apache license or something of that nature. That meant that the open source version you could put on some servers and run for other people and resell them, which is exactly what AWS was doing. Right? They had a managed Elasticsearch service based on the open source version of Elasticsearch. And Elastic made their money at the time by offering to run it for you, and by having what they called XPack, which is an extension pack, which added features which you couldn't get in things like managed Elasticsearch that wasn't run by Elastic. So that's how they kind of made their money. They argued at the time that they weren't making enough money and Amazon was kind of stealing their lunch, so they changed their license so that you weren't allowed to resell anymore. The response to this, of course, was lots of noise in the community, rightly or wrongly, and AWS then forked the last open source version of Elasticsearch, created OpenSearch. Run with that. In their tradition of making things that run on servers, not run on servers, or run on servers but not make you pay for them, what they've done is they've come up with OpenSearch serverless, which is a bit of a misnomer because it will still run on servers and you're still paying as if it was running on servers. So that's kind of my opinion. This is problematic because you pay per OpenSearch capacity unit, which again is another thing for someone to remember for the developer exam because you have to remember all of these CU acronyms. So you've now got Dynamo read and write, you've got Aurora capacity units, you've got OpenSearch capacity unit. You've got so many capacity units to work out now, which is just a pain. But you pay per provisioned hour, which is fine, I guess. That's fine. Because, I mean, with Dynamo, you kind of do the same, unless you set it in pay-as-you-go, because you pay for provisioned read and write capacity units on a per-hour basis, unless you set it to pay-as-you-go. And you pay for the storage in Dynamo, so again, I don't have an issue paying for the storage. The problem I have with this is there's no pay-as-you-go option. And that sort of makes sense from a commercials perspective. Because running Elasticsearch, running OpenSearch, I suppose, is expensive. It runs on big servers, it runs on powerful instances, and they take power and they take juice and so on and so on and so on. So it sort of makes sense, but this is what bothers me. Because with Dynamo, there's a pay-as-you-go option. With Aurora, whilst there isn't a pay-as-you-go option, if you wanted a pay-as-you-go database, you'd use Dynamo, I think. There isn't sort of a free tier here, not really. and there isn't a pay-as-you-go option whereby you can sort of explore OpenSearch without getting clocked for $1 for every 4 hours. So what's that? That's 720 hours in a month or so. I can't do the maths in my head, but that's a good couple of $100 a month for just playing with it. So that's the problem I have with this. Generally, it's good. It's a good step. It's definitely a good step because there's a lot less that you need to worry about configuring and managing and maintaining and patching and updating and all that jazz because they're doing it for you. But there's no way of exploring this for less than a couple of $100 a month. That bothers me.
But perhaps the people that are going to be using this, the sort of scale of projects that they're going to be using it for, that perhaps that couple of $100 a month is relatively small beans for them. I don't know.
It might end up being trivial. Yeah, it might be. But then you take into the kind of recommended architecture of an account vending machine and one account per developer and everyone having their own architect, and then all of a sudden it starts being not small beans because large companies, team of 100 developers, oh, hang on, we've just spent 2,000, 20,000, 200 on development environments. It just doesn't sit right. I'm not saying that Amazon shouldn't be doing this and shouldn't be exploring moving more things into serverless. I like serverless. I like not managing servers. I don't know. It feels like I know it's in preview and it feels like it shouldn't have come out of preview yet to me. It just doesn't sit right.
Well, perhaps that's what'll end up happening is, we know other commentators have said the same things or similar things about it. Perhaps the feedback will be incorporated. Amazon, of course, is a customer-led business. So if that is the feedback that they're going to get from the commentators and from the customers, then perhaps before it goes into general availability, that feedback will have been incorporated and the pricing model will be a bit more granular. But we'll have to wait and see, I guess. It could be another 3 to 6 months before that goes into general availability. So, and I guess that's largely going to depend on the level of adoption they get. And if that adoption is being hampered by the pricing model, then I'm sure that they will do something about it. But yeah, good to see, as you say, nonetheless. So in terms of the other articles in the blog post, they were sort of loosely grouped into data announcements initially. And I thought the second one was quite interesting as well, the Amazon Aurora Zero ETL integration with Amazon Redshift. So that's getting your data out of your database and into your data warehouse, which I guess can be a protected process. What do you think about this one?
What do they mean by zero ETL? Is this literally just dumping, because I haven't read into this one, is this literally just picking out of Aurora and dumping into Redshift without having to do any sort of transforms and sort of thing?
Well, yeah, because normally to get the data out of the database and into the data warehouse, you would have to go through an ETL process. So I think it's not zero ETL, but it's them doing the ETL for you. So much like a sort of serverless deployment, everything's still happening in the background, but it's a managed process for Amazon to get the data out of
you can't
Aurora
call it zero T, can you? Because it's still doing the extract and the load. It's just not doing any transform.
Well, it may well be doing some transform as well, but it's it's not something that you need to do as a customer.
Yeah, fair. Yeah. It's a good thing, right? All of these generally are good things. I've managed, not with Aurora, but data warehouse solutions that pick from 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different production databases, and then kind of all get lumped into this data warehouse solution. And it's mucky, it's messy, it's horrible to have to do. You end up doing something like a MySQL replication to do it, or running Lambda functions to pipe data around, or Kinesis streams sometimes and triggers, and it's just horrid. It's horrid. So anything that makes it less horrid is always welcome.
Cool. Then I'm going to skip the next one, but maybe we can talk a little bit about Data Zone, because that seemed to be quite a big one for them. So Data Zone being a data management service to catalog, discover, share and govern data. Data catalog populated by ML. Have you had a chance to look into this one?
Again, no, not really, but I can make some educated guesses based on the product page. So one of the things that large orgs that I've worked with at least struggle with is knowing where all their data is, because they've got so much of it. It's knowing where everything is, knowing where it's come from, know it's where it's going to, where it's moving, how it's doing that, who's responsible for it, and all that. Because big firms have huge amounts of data and they struggle to know where everything is. So by the looks of this, using ML, okay, because ML's a buzzword, whatever. Using ML to work out where everything is and then just give you this really nice GUI that shows you where it is and then lets you sort of pop it into Redshift or Lake Formation or whatever, without you having to know how to do that, and or be able to query it through Athena or through, again, Redshift. That's great. We like that because, again, it's I'm pinching an AWS term here. They like to take away customers' undifferentiated heavy lifting, right? All the difficult, nasty bits, they'll do for you. That's what they're trying to do, and that feels like what this is, which is good.
Cool. So as soon as you love the buzzword ML, the next one's also got some ML in it. ML powered forecasting with Q. So QuickSight Q, of course, being the BI tool. Not something I have any experience of working with myself, or indeed with any of our customers, but they do seem to talk a lot about it at reInvent. Yeah, I think there was a number of announcements about QuickSight Q, and I think this is all about sort of democratizing data science. Enabling business users who don't have a data science background to actually manipulate the data auto-magically using QuickSight Q. So there was this thing about ML powered forecasting. There was another thing which I didn't actually get it into the blog post, I don't think, but it was about asking why questions into Q. So being able to submit natural language queries into the data and get something sensible out of it. So that's not what this particular one is. This one's about the machine learning powered forecasting. But yeah, any thoughts around that, or the
I always
usage,
thought
the use
QuickSight
of
was
Q?
for people. I always thought the QuickSight was for people that couldn't be bothered how to learn how to use Tableau, personally.
Yeah, or didn't want to pay to use Tableau. Yeah,
Yeah, all that.
yeah.
Yeah, they love a bit of ML, don't they? They love a bit of ML, presumably because you can just put up this great big, oh, it's ML, it's machine learning, it's this, it's that, it's the
Magic.
other. Yeah, exactly. It's a good bit of sales smoke and mirrors. It's all if statements. The natural language stuff is cool. The dashboards are cool. It looks cool. Yeah, business intelligence is not something I've ever really had any great experience with because I've never needed to. Being sort of the cloud DevOps, I just kind of hook things together and then go, data team, there you go. Yeah, it looks useful. If nothing else, it might be worth seeing if we can get someone on this podcast that actually knows about data management.
Maybe. Yeah, it's not really our area of expertise, is it? But we're just sort of talking about, what came out of reInvent last week. So let's move on to security. There was a couple of security announcements. There was the container runtime threat detection for guard duty.
Yeah, so that
Anything to
one's
say on
cool.
that one?
Guard duty being what it is, so the runtime for a container is not necessarily your code, it's what your code's running on top of, if that makes sense. So it's like Docker or pick a container runtime. There's half a dozen or so, but the only one that comes to mind is Docker. So it's runtime threat detection rather than image threat detection. So it's kind of it's sort of doing that with your protection, if you like. It's we're scanning everything in the ECR, and then we're also validating that where you're running it isn't also stuffed. Great, lovely, we like that. It's also integrated with EKS, which is nice. So detections for threats inside containers, attempts to access host nodes. We likey.
Nice. And then this one, so the next one was about this Amazon security lake, and I've seen loads of coverage on this. So I guess the market and the analysts getting a bit excited about this one. But so Amazon security lake is a data lake that will aggregate security telemetry data from multiple AWS sources and many partner sources, and they're touting it as the first data lake that supports the OCSF schema frameworks, as the Open Cybersecurity Schema Framework standard, which AWS have been heavily involved in defining. So what do you think about this one, John? Are you as excited about this as the rest of the market?
No, because A, I'm not a security professional, and B, I've worked a bit with CrowdStrike before, and it just always gives me a headache. It's important, it's important, but it's, security data in security telemetry looks different from normal data that you put in a data lake, so it makes sense to have a lens, if you like, on a data lake, but specifically for security. So that kind of makes sense. It does also make me giggle that, as you say, it supports the OCSF standard, because of course it does. Amazon wrote a good chunk of that, so why wouldn't it?
Yeah. I guess it's good to get all of this. I mean, I guess everyone's competing to be that single source of truth for all of your security data, and you're always invariably going to end up with a mixture of Amazon tools and third-party tools. So somewhere where you can put all of that to correlate and cross-reference, I guess is going to be a pretty useful tool. But as I say, it was the reason I picked on that one. Just seen a lot of noise about it, so a lot of announcements in the press about it. So certainly some excitement. We could talk about EC2 instances, but that's pretty boring.
We could talk about Graviton, because I'm always up for a chat about an ARM processor. I like ARM.
Go for it.
So in the world of OEMs and CSPs and so on making their own silicon, they've done it again. They've made version 3 of their Graviton silicon, which we like. 25% better performance. Is that you wrote this? Is that performance or is that price to performance? Because that's an important difference.
Both, I think, than Graviton 2, that is. So,
Which, again, was something like 25% better than Graviton 1. So it's like, okay, this is now getting on for, 40%, 25, and then 25 is not 50, than the original Gravitons. And the original Gravitons were stunning. Just generally, the world seems to have woken up to the fact, and we can largely thank Apple for this with the Apple Silicon. I know I'm sitting here on an Apple Silicon machine, and so are you. That ARM, all of a sudden, isn't this noddy little thing that you put on a Raspberry Pi. It's really powerful, and it's still low power, which, great, love it, brilliant. I mean, yes, okay, there's architectural differences, and I've had this with ARM Lambdas before, where from time to time a particular dependency doesn't support ARM, but that's becoming less common. So yeah, we very much like it, and of course, if it hooks up with the Nitro cards as well, this is great. We like this, and of course, if it's on EC2s now, it won't be very long until they hit Lambdas.
Yep. Yeah, well, you can already select, Graviton-powered instances for many of the AWS services. So your RDS instances, Lambdas, and so on and so forth. Certainly on Graviton too, but I'm not sure exactly which of those managed services are available on Graviton 3 yet, but like you say, it won't be long because they roll these things out very quickly. And certainly this has been of interest to our clients as well to migrate to Graviton to get that enhanced performance for a lower cost. I mean, why wouldn't you? It's almost a no-brainer so long as everything is compatible with it, which invariably it is. It does become a bit of a no-brainer.
It isn't always. The things I've found not compatible with it tend to be like image manipulation programs and stuff that I've seen have issues with it. But again, they're getting there. They're getting there.
Yeah.
I mean, what ARM is really good for...
I was going to say you could offload those to another managed service.
yeah, potentially. Now, what ARM is really good for is lots of I/O, lots of input, lots of output, because the I/O controllers are just top rate, and not high performance computing, but like high volume computing, just doing a lot. It's very good for that, and lots of maths. It's very good at that.
Cool. So then we had another couple of articles about EC2, just some of the higher end HPC, high performance computing type instances that were launched at the event. And I'm conscious of time, so let's just pick on one more article. I'm not sure you're going to have much to say about this one either, John, but I'm going to talk about it because I just liked watching it. It looked really cool. So they launched this tool called SimSpace Weaver. Which is basically a tool which allows you to run massive spatial simulations without managing any infrastructure. So you can basically run these enormous simulations of cities, of human pedestrian flow and traffic flow around cities and things like that. And it's the kind of thing you can just get lost in a bit of a YouTube hole for.
Is that not like just like playing Sim City?
Kind of is, yeah, but on a kind of bit more grown up fashion, and the cities in this will probably go a bit bigger than your Sim City cities.
Well, and
But
there's no giant robot that comes along and smashes stuff.
yeah, well, I mean, it's your simulation, so if that's what you want to simulate, then I'm sure you can probably do that in SimSpace Weaver. But I did get lost a little bit in YouTube just watching all these virtual pedestrians walking around Las Vegas as they were trying to figure out how many pedestrians Las Vegas can actually handle. And I just thought it was pretty cool. It's not my area. I'm not into city planning or smart cities or anything like that. But it's just quite a cool tool, really.
Good to see that it's integrated with both Unreal Engine and Unity. Because I'm not going to get into the specifics here, but the pricing model, the licensing model for Unity is horrific and very expensive. So it's good that it supports both.
Fair enough. Yeah, always good to have some options. Anyway, as I said, I'm conscious of time, and our half hour has expired very quickly this week. So I don't know where that time went. So if you want to have a read of any of the articles that we've been talking about, the links will be in the show notes. So there were a lot more announcements that we didn't have time to cover in this week's podcast. But as always, thanks for listening. Our podcast is available on all major podcast distribution channels. So if you like it, give us a review. Feel free to share us with your friends who you think may be interested in listening. And we'll be back
just
next
share
week
it if they're not interested.
Share it anyway. Yeah, just spam it everywhere. Why not? Thanks again for listening. We'll be back next week with episode 10.